Hi everyone, good morning, afternoon or evening relative to where you're dialing in from. My name is Jack Medine and on behalf of OPSWAT, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you joining us today. Today's webinar is titled Security First MFT. And if you're working in IT, infrastructure or compliance, you're in exactly the right place. Believe it is fair to say that file-based attacks remain one of the most persistent and evolving threats facing organizations today. From malware hidden in documents to sophisticated zero-day exploits that are buried in file transfers. And we can say that these risks, the threats that they pose, they are very real and the stakes are also as high. And that's why we're here, to explore how a security-first approach to managed file transfer, powered by AI native detection and advanced threat emulation, is changing the game. At OPSWAT, I'm the Senior Product Manager for MetaDefender Ether. I'm not going to be doing this webinar alone. I'm joined today by Salazar Ditso, our Senior Product Manager for MFT at OPSWAT, as well as Aline Besnia, who's the Senior Director of Engineering for the predictive Aline AI engine. Moving on to the agenda, what we're planning to cover over the next 3/4 of an hour, we'll be walking you through why file transfer is the real security perimeter, the hidden risks inside traditional file workflows, embedding zero-day detection into MFT, using predictive AI to detect malicious intent, and building a proactive file inspection architecture.
Let me take over from here, Jack, if that's okay. So let's start with the first question that we should all be asking ourselves, which is what exactly is moving across our networks? So this slide illustrates what a typical day of file movements looks like in most organizations. You have inbound, where you are pulling configuration files, firmware updates, patches, office documents from partners, vendors, and contractors. And you have outbound, where you are pushing compliance reports, log files, replication data, images, essentially your operational data estate constantly in motion. And that's exactly where the problems will start. Each of these flows represents a potential ingress or egress point for a threat actor. And the challenge isn't just the volume, it's also the diversity of file types and origins. For example, a firmware file or configuration file can directly impact systems, while something like a PDF or an image might carry embedded malicious content. Every single one of these transfers is a potential attack surface. And in most environments today, these are managed by a patchwork of ad hoc tools, manual workflows, legacy FTPs, configurations through these FTPs that simply were never designed with security in mind. If you move on to the next slide, as we zoom in on how those files are actually being moved, the picture gets even more concerning. You've got the ad hoc file sharing, employees using whatever is convenient, and I'm sure most of you have experienced this. Some call it shadow IT of some sorts, where USB sticks, personal cloud drives, and direct links to contractors' laptops is the way to transfer files. Then you've got the CRMs and the ERPs of this world, synchronization jobs running at automated schedules, pulling and pushing structured data across network boundaries with minimal inspection. And then there is the third-party devices, vendor laptops, contractor endpoints that connect directly to your environment, often bypassing your standard endpoint controls entirely. So even the endpoint protection is not really helping you in those cases. So each one of these is a legitimate business need. What we are not saying is stop sharing files. What we are saying is that without a governed, inspected, policy-enforced transfer workflows, any of these becomes a viable vector for any threat actor to traverse your security perimeters. And if you move on to the next slide, you will see that data actually backs this up very clearly. According to Cybersecurity Service, 58% of all ICS and OT cybersecurity incidents actually originate from IT. Not in the plant, not in the OT network, in IT. And 27% are triggered by transient devices, exactly the kind of removable media and vendor laptops that I just mentioned with regards to the previous slide. At the macro level, the World Economic Forum's 2025 Global Cybersecurity Outlook reports that 27% in rise in cybersecurity year over year. These aren't abstract statistics. These represent real operational disruptions, data exfiltration events, and in critical infrastructures, safety critical failures. As Benny Sani, our CEO, put it directly, devices are not designed to scan files, and that's the gap. And that's exactly what this webinar is about to address. With that context, let me hand it over to Jack, who's going to walk you through the security paradox at the heart of this problem and why solving it requires a fundamentally different approach.
Excellent. Thank you, Salazar. That's some pretty interesting insight, both from yourself and our founder. It does make one think about the sheer volume of data and respectively the files that will be traveling across networks. And I think within that lies a really interesting security paradox here. Organizations have had to choose between deeper threat inspection and more advanced analysis in order to stop the zero-day based threats. However, at that same time, they're also told that they can't slow down the flow of data or business operations. And today, we're going to show you how you can achieve both deep threat inspection and high-speed data flow. So let's first look at traditional antivirus and reputation services. They're great at stopping known threats, the tip of the iceberg that's articulated on screen here. But the greatest risk, the greatest impact to any organization lies below the surface in that tiny fraction of a percent. Now, whilst we're on the subject of unknown threats, I just want to call out our threat landscape report from 2025. We will also be bringing out a new threat landscape report in 2026 as part of Black Hat. However, to look into some of the key data points from what we released last year, we noted a 127% increase in multi-stage malware complexity. There was also 1 in 14 files that were initially deemed safe by public feeds and later confirmed as malicious. Now, in order to keep on top of the threat landscape, the solution isn't to analyze less, it's to analyze smarter. This is the principle behind the modern threat detection pipeline. Instead of a single sort of single choke point, we use a series of intelligent filters. We use fast, low-cost methods to eliminate most threats pretty much instantly. That means we can reserve our most powerful tool, the sandbox, for the truly unknown. Now, on screen now is our threat processing pipeline, also referred to as MetaDefender Ether. And it's a 4-layered pipeline that consists of threat reputation, dynamic analysis, threat scoring, and threat hunting. I'm now going to walk you through each layer and the value that is unlocked. Now, before we even consider like detonating the file, emulating its behavior, it will go through layer 1 or threat reputation layer. And the purpose of the threat reputation layer is that immediate understanding. Is it a good or bad? Is it essentially known verdict for the IOC that's been analyzed? Is it associated with a malicious IP, a malicious domain? And the whole purpose of this is just really simple. It's like really instantaneous, sort of filtering out the 99% of common threats without any impact on performance. As we move on to layer 2, our dynamic analysis layer, this is where the sandbox is positioned as part of the pipeline. And with our sandbox, it's different to what is also seen in the market, because we are not a virtual machine-based sandbox. We're an emulation-based sandbox. And with that, we start with an initial sort of static analysis to understand the calls to action. How is this file constructed? And then we start to emulate that threat. We're simulating the CPU and the OS components from the ground up. This means that we can still provide like deep granular visibility into every instruction, every API call, and every memory request. It's incredibly difficult for malware to detect if it's been emulated, so it behaves as it would on a real endpoint, and in turn, revealing its true intent. As we move on to layer 3 and layer 4, then as we've also already seen, the analysis doesn't end from the threat intelligence, from the sandboxing. There's still more analysis that is undertaken. And it's not ending with a simple malicious or clean verdict. Layer 3, the threat scoring, generates a very detailed report with full context, including mappings to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, as well as outlining our library of threat indicators that are all created in-house. This data is then very actionable for threat intelligence, SOC teams, so that they can then protect the organization that they're defending. The intelligence that is built up through the previous layers, that then empowers layer 4, our automated threat hunting. The indicators of compromise, the construct, the way the file is built is all categorized and then correlated so that we can identify relationships of the threats within a database. So in summary, the modern defense needs an intelligent pipeline leveraging threat intel, sandboxing, and threat hunting, in particular emulation-based sandboxing, to ensure threats are detected across the entire pipeline. Now we're going to hand back over to Silazard, who will dive into the unmanaged risks of transferring across a network.
Thank you, Jack. So let me pick up where Jack just left off. So he walked us through the 4-layer detection pipeline and how that architecture closes the gap between the known threats, the known threat filtering, and the zero-day analysis. But before we talk about our solution in the context of MFT specifically, I want to ground us in an operation reality of what organizations are dealing with today when they try to secure their transfer workflows. This slide gives you a visual summary of legacy MFT landscape, the fragmentation, the silos, the reliance on bolt-on security integrations. It's a picture most of our customers recognize immediately. So if you move on to the next slide, let me break down the 4 core failure modes we see consistently across legacy MFT deployments, and we do see this consistently when we talk to customers. First, the illusion of secure enough. Most traditional MFT platforms secure the transport layer. They encrypt the channel, they authenticate the endpoint, but they do not inspect the file itself. Compliance readiness is not the same as a security posture, and treating them as equivalent is exactly how organizations get breached. Second element, incomplete audit trails. Legacy MFTs prioritize delivery confirmation over forensic traceability. When you are doing incident response and you need to answer the questions of what file moved, where, when, and what did it do, most platforms cannot give you that at a file level granularity. Third, workflow fragmentation. So disparate tools, custom scripts, manual handoffs, these introduce both operational risk and also dependency risk. One misconfigured script in your data pipeline can become your biggest attack surface in an instance. And then fourth, visibility and implementation complexity. Legacy platforms are notoriously difficult to stand up. Policy configurations is a very time-intensive task. And without centralized oversight, you end up with blind spots across your transfer environment. These aren't edge cases; they are the endemic that represents this category of traditional file moving applications. If we move on to the next slide, I like to talk about consequences, right? And the consequences here are quantifiable. 2.9 billion records exposed in the largest single file-based breach on record. The global average cost of data breach now sits somewhere around 5 million, according to IBM's 2024 survey. And critically, the average time to detect and contain the breach is still over 250 days. These are amazing numbers, 250 days to get from breach to detection. During that period of time, just imagine how much can go wrong with your malicious actor already partially controlling your environment. So that is 8 months, 250 days, 8 months. That's 8 months of dwell time in your environments before you even know something is wrong. These are the numbers that should be driving your executive conversations around MFT security investments. And the root cause is in most of these incidents is an unsecure file transfer workflow that nobody thought of protecting. If you move on to the next slide, please. So we don't have to look too far for real world. March 2023, movie transfer zero-day SQL injection vulnerability resulted in breaches across 2,600 plus organizations. More than 2,500 organizations were impacted, exposing the data of over 90 million individuals. A single unpatched file transfer platform became the largest supply chain compromise of the year. The pattern is consistent. File transfer infrastructure is being targeted precisely because it sits at the intersection of high-value data, broad network access, and historically weak security controls. So the question is, what do we do about it? And the next slide will give us our answer, OPSWAT answer. OPSWAT Secure MFT delivers the MFT to MFT file transfer across network boundaries. It is designed to go from low to high, high to low, or any topology your architecture will require or already requires, with this multi-layered security embedded at every stage that Jack was talking about. Not a bolted on as an afterthought, not delegated to a third-party ICAP integration, built in securely and natively. That means multi-scanning across 30 plus AV engines, deep CDR, virtual sandbox detonation that Jack was talking about for behavioral analysis. And now with MetaDefender Ether, predictive AI-based verdict generation, all operating at the file level on both the ingress and also the egress side of the transfer. You also get granular approval workflows with our MFT, file level encryption, and outbreak prevention. So if a threat is detected mid-transfer, the platform can still quarantine it, alert, and escalate without interrupting compliant file flows. We are not stopping your business day, your day as or your business as usual. We just block the files that should be blocked. So this is how you eliminate the security paradox Jack described earlier. You don't compromise throughput for inspection depth. You engineer a pipeline that delivers both. And with that, let me hand it over to Aline, who will talk about the specific zero-day detection problem and why we think AI changes the game.
Thank you, Szilard. And let's start, first of all, by maybe breaking a little bit down the detection technologies that we have, right? Because throughout the years, I think that we have a few detection technologies that are starting with signature-based AVs, which are very well known for detecting known threats, right? They have the signatures, but they also have a little bit of a reactive security. And on the other part of the spectrum, we have the sandbox, right, which is great at catching known and unknown threats, but it does take a little bit of time in order to be able to be sure that to analyze the threat and analyze everything that has to do with the specific file. We need to find something that's great and that's working in between those two solutions, right? And this is where we have our newest technology, which is called Predictive AI, which is an ML-based pattern recognition technology, which is great at detecting threats by understanding maybe the intent of each of the threats, each of the files that we have. And if we go to the next slide, we will see also a little bit how it works, right? So I think the biggest difference between a traditional AV and one that focuses on the malware is the fact that, I think the biggest difference between an AV, like a traditional AV, and a malware, And I think the biggest difference between a traditional AV and a machine learning technology that is able to predict the threats is the fact that the malware is going to be rule-based, while the machine learning is going to be pattern-based, right? And this means that we are looking at a lot of the features, a lot of the properties that the file has, and then we're trying to establish a pattern where we would be able to detect the malicious intent, right? And we're also extracting various behavior analysis items from that file in order to understand better how that file would perform in the environment. And if we move to the next slide, we're going to see the new security model, the way that we envision it, right? Definitely the AVs, the signature-based AVs are not going to go away, but we see a very close collaboration between the sandbox and the predictive technologies that we have. And how we see this is that the sandbox is great at detecting the threats, and then based on the unknown threats that we have detected with the sandbox, we have a pipeline that's going to allow us to retrain the model that we have in order to increase its efficacy. If we go to the next slide, we see some very interesting things here, right? First of all, if we just look on the right side, we're going to see that it's around 10 million to, inspect an alert and see if everything is okay, which doesn't necessarily seem like a lot of time. But if we look at the middle, we see that there's actually more than 10,000 threads that on average a SOC will receive daily. So this means actually a lot of time, right? It's around 1,600 analyst hours per month that we need to spend in order to just triage the noise that we get from all those alerts that are generated. And if you go to the next slide, we see that the focus that we have with our predictive technology is to basically have a very low set of false positives. We're going to have less than 0.1%, and actually in the meantime we have been working to reduce this even more and more, and we're going to be able to have just a few false positives, which means that we want to save a lot of the time for the SOC analyst, right? We also do this by making it very fast. So the way that we have engineered the technology is basically focused on delivering super fast, under 100 milliseconds for the P99 for analyzing each of the files. If we go to the next slide, there's a few interesting things here, because I think between the high volume of data and all the new malware variants that we have, and together with maybe the attacks that are becoming more and more complex, and also like the continuous modifying payloads, we need to find something that security teams actually need. And from our tests, from what we have seen on all the data sets that we have analyzed, we see that the pattern recognition is actually a great thing at basically detecting the new malware variants, trying to bring additional context about the potential threats, and it definitely helps in order to prioritize the security analysts, basically reducing and also focusing the time that the security analysts are spending there. And if we go to the next slide, we also want to talk a little bit about how we think that predictable AI is different, right? And we have identified a few key areas. First of all, as my colleague said earlier, we want to have an AV that's actually specially trained in order to to train it on enterprise content flows. This basically means that we have curated data sets that resemble a lot the files and everything that we see within our real-life traffic, and that's what we have used in order to train it to be more optimized for the content, for the enterprise content. And if you look also on the zero-day threats, just clear that. It's the other one. I think it's this one.
Sorry, mate.
Yeah, no worries. The other part is the zero-day retraining group, right? Is basically what we have talked a little bit earlier. We have the sandbox that's collaborating a lot with our AV, and each of them are with the other one better, right? So we constantly improves. And for the pre-execution intelligence layer, we really believe that our AI is managing to kind of close the blind spot between signature scanning and the sandbox automation. Right, it's right there in the sweet spot between the two of them. If we go to the next slide, we will see like a short summary, right? And if we have a few takeaways from this presentation, I think that it's important to note that it's going to detect things before they execute, so nothing gets executed, right? We use machine learning in order to do the prediction. There's a very low false positive number. There's the advantage of 0 days, so if there is something new out there that maybe needs that needs signatures to be updated, we are likely to catch it faster. And definitely, we do need the multi-scanning because it provides a lot more intelligence, a lot more depth. This just comes in order to amplify the multi-scanning. And for the last slide that I have for my part, we have a few things that I think are important here. First of all, I think it's important to know that predictive Align AI is already across the MetaDefender platform, so it's very easy to integrate it. It's available in both the cloud and the on-premise MetaDefender core, and through this, it's available in a lot of our products. It's available on both Windows and Linux, right? This is also going to expand the way that that our customers can use it, and I think that we can look at the fact that there's definitely a lot of optimizations that have been put into this engine, because we're trying to maintain a very small footprint in order to be able to also scale within the deployments that we have, and to do it even to scan them even faster. And with that, I'll hand it over to Szilard to tell us a little bit about the benefits of the unified secure file transfer architecture.
Okay, so we just walk you through the technical depth of MetaDefender Ether and the predictive Align AI, the how of zero-day detection at the file level. Now, let me bring this back to the business outcomes, because at the end of the day, this is ultimately what a unified secure file transfer architecture delivers for your security operations. From an operations standpoint, you get centralized visibility across your entire file activity surface, inbound transfers, outbound data flows, all of it in single pane of glass. That translates directly into reduced alert fatigue and faster triage. At the perimeter, MFT becomes an active security control, not just a delivery mechanism, and that's a very important distinction comparing our product to traditional MFT solutions. Files are inspected before they actually touch your internal systems. Malware is blocked before internal exposure occurs. Zero-day threats are surfaced earlier in the kill chain, and the blast radius of any successful attack is then dramatically reduced as a result. And then if we move on to the next slide, this is the platform that powers it all, the MetaDefender platform. Everything we have discussed today, the multi-scanning, deep CDR, the sandboxing, file-based vulnerability assessment, SBOM analysis, proactive DLP, predictive Align AI engine, country of origin detection. These aren't standalone products. They are part of a unified capabilities with a single platform that spans the full file security lifecycle. Whether you are protecting endpoints, kiosks, media firewalls, cloud storage, email gateways, managed file transfer infrastructure that we talked about extensively today, on-premise, air-gapped, or in the cloud, MetaDefender provides consistent policy-driven security enforcement across every data transfer vector that you possibly can have. And critically for our IT/OT customers, extends all the way down into operational technology layer through our industrial firewall, unidirectional and bidirectional gateways, and data diode integrations, giving you a cohesive security architecture from the enterprise network all the way to your shop floor. So that's the MetaDefender platform. And on that note, let me hand it back to Jack to close us out.
Excellent. Thank you, Szilard, and many thanks to both you and Aline for the overview that we've provided today. just highlighting how OPSWAT is enabling a security-first MFT embedded with emulation and AI native file-based detection. So to everyone else on this session, if you would like any further detail, then please get in touch through the QR code that's on screen now, or through any of the resources that are within the chat or attached accordingly. Thank you very much.